listening to Out Late with David. True stories of coming out later in life. And now here's your host, David Cotton.
Today's guest talks about coming out as a process, but one where it gets better each day. However, it didn't start that way. 2 years into a relationship with his former wife, he came out as gay. But she decided to stay with them, and they got married 4 years later. There were some twists and turns along the way, eventually leading to divorce. But now, happily remarried, the union with his husband created a modern family with children ranging from 18 to 42. Stefan Schneider joins us today from his home in Larchmont, New York. Stefan, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. It's good to see you.
Thank you. I want to know more about this blended family with you and your husband, but first I kind of want to go back in time.
Yeah.
Where you were married to your wife, you were in a relationship with her, you came out as gay, she decides to stay with you. Tell me about that. How did you navigate it?
I think, I think it's easy to second guess these things, right? With hindsight with hindsight, it's easier to reflect on things and see things clearly. But I think, you have to realize the context of the time. It was the early 90s. It wasn't so cool to be gay. We still were in the midst of the AIDS epidemic. And, I always think that maybe since I was 5 or 6, I knew that I was gay. It was torture. I used to wish it away when I was a kid, at night, trying to pray the gay away, as they say, right? And really feeling, in some ways, cursed. I experimented a little bit in high school. And then I think that, at the time I was very relationship oriented. And I think that when I put my foot into the gay community, it just, there weren't role models that showed, me, loving, relationships. I'm sure that they were there. I just didn't see them at the time, I just wanted to be normal. You know what I mean? And I just wanted to fit in. And, I love.
It's funny how we characterize that as normal too.
Yes.
I mean, we say normal and then we go, but we're normal. We're not abnormal.
What I considered normal at the time, right? Like what I was led to believe was normal or what felt more mainstream, right? I loved her very much. We started a relationship in college. I loved her very much. And we had a bit of a long distance relationship, and I got to a point where it was probably like maybe a year and a half into us dating. When things were starting to get more serious, I came out and basically told her, "Hey, look, I have something to share with you. This is a really hard thing to reveal, but I'm pretty sure that I'm gay." And I don't think we can continue forward. There's a lot of dialogue back and forth on it, at the time. And, sort of the where we settled on was that, I couldn't reconcile. I mean, we talked fairly openly. It was not an easy conversation to have. We talked pretty openly, but where we settled on was that I was probably bi, right? Because I couldn't reconcile with the fact that that I had feelings for her. I was attracted to her, and I think also, sometimes when you make those revelations, it creates authenticity and it kind of pulls you in, like what's separating you pulls you in closer. And, but I think, we stayed together. I proposed a few years later. We were in our early 20s. We got married, had a fairly traditional wedding and, but it was always looming there in the background. It was like one of those things that, we were fairly avoidant about. We didn't talk about it, but then, it's like anything else. It loomed its ugly head a number of times until the marriage dissolved 14 years later,
So you said that it maybe made you closer by being vulnerable and honest with her in your communication.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I didn't want to destroy our family, right? And do damage to her. That was never my intention, right? Go into it with, go into these things with dubious intentions. But But, we found ourselves, it created a lot of tension in the relationship, and what initially felt like authentic closeness, became a tremendous source of, tension in the relationship over time, and something that we couldn't talk about. It was too painful in some ways, until it boiled to a head, at the time that we decided to get divorced. So.
Was your sexuality the reason for the divorce? Is that what?
Yeah, I think it was the root cause for the divorce. It was a big burden for her. And what I'd say to you also is, I remember at that time, I just remember, because it's hard to reflect back, right? 13 years later, I'm in a very, very different, much happier place in my life. But, I always thought that, I remember thinking at the time that I would never be happy, that happiness wasn't something that was in the cards for me. And that, I couldn't understand why I was happy. I was very depressed at the time too. I think suppressing that's very, very hard. It was a rough period. I think even after coming out, the divorce process was fairly, acrimonious. It took us 3 years to get divorced. We went to trial. We wasted an absolute fortune on attorneys at the time, and it left me in a really rough state, for a number of years afterwards, financially and emotionally. But at some point it clicks, and you pick up the pieces and you move forward, right? That's I had a very dear friend. I actually just reconnected with her not too long ago, and I remember at the time she was going through divorce, and she said these very wise words to me. And I just told her, that this stuck with me all these years, but she said, the only way out is through sometimes. Right. Yeah. And
Power through.
Yeah, exactly. So I got through through those years, and I've gotten to a better place, which is I'm much happier now. And, what I'd say to you also is, I always thought that I was never going to be happy. I'm actually happy. I'm actually very happy.
I can tell that in your face. Yeah, it just comes across.
Yeah.
So why did you think you never would be happy? What was the thought you had then beyond that?
I went to therapy at the time, right? Because, it was like one of those things, like, you can't keep this all inside. So I had a number of therapists over the years that I saw. And, I'd go to therapy for a while, and then I'd step back, and then I'd go back into therapy for a while. And, I always kind of felt like, okay, I'm in a situation where, I've made this decision, right? And if I made this decision, I have to stick with it. And we started to have kids, and I always wanted to be a dad. I absolutely love and adore my kids, and kids in general. I love their authenticity and, their spirit. But I remember at the time, going to therapy, and, it was really hard. I remember my therapist wanted me to talk more about, like, well, what would it be like if you let yourself be gay? Right. And I couldn't even have the conversation with him. I couldn't even have the discussion with him. I was so avoidant on it, because it wasn't something I could allow myself to feel or to think about, and really the way that I reconciled with it was, in some ways I recognized that to have what I wanted at the time, which was to be married with kids and to have a family, that I'd have to sacrifice something of myself. Right. And I had this mindset that, like, being gay, I would also sacrifice something that was really important to me. So it was a matter of choosing one or the other. And I thought choosing to be in a heterosexual relationship was it was a path that I had chosen, and I was committed to stick with it, was the way that I looked at things,
Yeah, it's kind of a what's at risk, if I do one thing or the other, which am I going to benefit in our minds the best from?
Yeah, and either way, there'd be some form of trade-off, right? Yeah. So I felt like either way, I'd be compromising something that was important to me, and and that's how I think I just coped with it at the time.
When you were married, did the kids know that Dad was gay?
No. But in hindsight, my daughter's like, my daughter will say stuff to me, like, she'll be like, You did make some pretty fabulous. You did sew some pretty fabulous dresses for my Barbie. It should have been fairly obvious. I mean, there are things about me that like were very like stereotypically gay, and but it's the things that we talk about now, that there were all these context clues that nobody had any idea. In fact, when I came out, a lot of people were very surprised. I think there were certain people who were not at all shocked, but a number of people were very surprised. I think I hit it tremendously well. And it's funny too, because I had actually, in hindsight, I had actually separated from a lot of people that knew me when I was younger. I lost contact with a lot of the people. Like I almost like sort of like erased that part of my identity to create this new identity. And I've reconnected with a lot of those people since coming out. I have this one good friend from high school. She's one of my closest friends now. And she always said to me that, when we reconnected and she saw these pictures of me on Facebook, she said, you have like this picture perfect, like, Sears portrait looking family with a beautiful wife and gorgeous kids. And she's like, and I thought to myself, he's straight? Like what? Because I mean, my nickname when I was a kid, we always laughed about this. I had two older brothers who absolutely tortured me with their friends. I was the baby in the family. And my nickname on the street that I grew up on was Fruity. Fruity, because they thought I was like a very gay presenting little 6 or 7 year old kid, even to the point where I remember one of the moms didn't know my real name, and my parents are from Germany, but my name is fairly ethnic anyway. And she just thought that I remember one day I came over and she said, does Fruity want some ice cream? And I kind of made a face, and they all started laughing. My brother and all his friends started laughing, and they had to tell her what my real name was, and she just thought it was some German name. Yeah.
How did you feel as a child when they would call you Fruity?
It was something, it was a curse. It was torture for me. I did not want to be gay, when I was a kid. I felt very different. I think when you're a kid, you just want to feel accepted. You want to feel, as we said earlier, quote unquote, normal, right? You want to fit in. And it left me feeling very vulnerable. Being gay was not a positive thing at that time in the 70s and 80s growing up. And particularly during the AIDS epidemic, that started back in, was it 1980, 81? So I remember too, it was really funny. My mom had this good friend, and she tried to it's around the time that I was 13, and you start to present sexually, you're hitting puberty and all that stuff. And my mom's good friend, said to her, have him read this book. And she gave her a copy of Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex But Were Afraid to Ask. And have you ever read are you familiar with the movie?
Mm-hmm.
Movie's very funny. I still appreciate it. But the book was supposed to be this informed, authority on sex. And the chapter about being gay was horrifically depressing. It was horrifically depressing. And it basically said, most gays will be subject to a life of unhappiness, right? And it was at a time they wrote the book when gay was still, being gay was still a mental illness. Was how they defined it. And so
or the DSM was changed.
Yeah. And what I'd say is, I remember that was like psychologically that damaged me, rather than helping me.
I remember even things in the Boy Scout manual and Boy Scout book about, how you should not touch yourself and things like that.
Yeah.
The kind of the programming of heteronormative perspective on the world, and very Puritan, and make you feel bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
In your own mind, and you're a kid.
Yeah.
This programming that we're doing. As a life coach, I'm committed to help you discover the passions in your life and help you map a course to achieve the things you really want. Together, we will unwind those persistent self-doubts that are holding you back. You'll begin to see your passions more clearly and set achievable goals. Throughout your journey, I'll be there to challenge and encourage you in moving forward to discover your authentic self. For more information about my personal life coaching services or to arrange a complimentary consultation, visit davidcottoncoaching.com.
You're listening to Out Late with David.
So when you went through all this, at some point in time, you realized you were gay. Was there like a moment in time? Like for me, I looked in a mirror actually and said, David Cotton, you're gay. When was that realization for you? Do you remember?
I remember my brother was about 4 years older than me, and my older brother happens to be gay. And, so I hung out with a little bit more of a mature crowd when I was in my, in my early years in high school. I hung out with a lot of his friends. And I think I was always a bit of an old soul, even as a kid. And I remember I went to a party with some of his friends, and I ended up making out with one of his guy friends at the time, and entered into a relationship for a couple of months with this guy, and dated him, and we had sex at the time. And I kind of thought to myself, like, I was like, this is my place. I have found me. I have discovered me, right? But then we broke up, and I was absolutely gutted and heartbroken at the time.
How old were you at the time?
I was 14. At the time, so fairly young. And then, I'd venture into that space, but, a lot of my brother's friends graduated from high school at that point in time and had moved on. And so I kind of had to reestablish friend groups, and didn't really find anybody that I clicked with, in that way or connected with in that way. So I just sort of swept it under the rug. But, I remember coming to terms with it and saying to myself that at that early age, this is me, 100% who I am,
And it sounds like you even had a role model in your older brother.
Mm-hmm.
Was he out gay and out at the time?
He was out, but still fairly closeted, so,
okay.
And I remember I even confided in him, who I was. I mean, he knew who I was, it wasn't like it was this big secret. But, it's just one of those things, like, we just didn't talk about it. We just didn't talk about it over the years. But I remember confiding to him before I got married that I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing. I came out to a couple of friends before I got married and basically said, like, I don't know if I can go through with this. And, there were maybe 3 people who knew at the time, and we just never talked about it, So
really,
yeah.
Well, so no one had any advice, like, slow down, think about this. They just
we were all in our early
supported
20s.
your decision to go forward.
Yeah, we were all in our early 20s. I think you make different decisions with the context you have, the information you have at that time. So they're empathetic. I think that they didn't want to force the decision. And I moved forward and said, I'm going through with this, but I just need to talk to somebody and express what's going on. And I think they were waiting for me to maybe raise it. They would have been supportive if I'd continued to bring it up, but it wasn't the case at the time. Yeah.
So you decided to separate and divorce. Yeah. What did you learn about yourself through that experience?
That was a rough process. It was gut wrenching to me to not see the kids every day. I would say financially, it was very hard too. Separating out and having to juggle the expenses and child support and court, costs and attorney fees and things like that is really, really rough. But I think that there was. I remember when I first came out, there was and I first moved out. It's really funny. It was February 1st, 14 years ago. So we're almost at the 14-year anniversary of that time. It was a mix of elation and excitement and just incredible hardship and depression and sadness. A lot of guilt. around, around the time too. I felt like I had split up my family and destroyed my family to affirm myself. Right. You know, I felt a little self-absorbed at the time. I had a lot of time. I mean, you think about it, 14 years, it's like spending 14 years in a prison cell. And I don't want to say it was miserable, right? But it's, you're sitting alone with it for a lot of that time. It's like sitting in solitary confinement with it, save for those times where maybe I talked to a therapist about it, right? But you're holding on to the secret. And, I had a lot of time to just sort of say, like, this is authentically who I am. I know who I am and what decisions am I going to make and how's my life going to play out and am I happy? And so I'd sit up at night and wrestle with it and think about it. So what I'd say is I went into it and I think I just sort of said, like, okay, I made that decision, there was a side of me that I wanted to satisfy by being in this relationship. Now I get to try out the other side, right? Without, I'm free to kind of move forward and try and experience this other half of myself. So,
how did the children react to the divorce at the time? And dad's now out as gay.
Yeah, it was hard for the kids, I think. The thing is, I didn't come out as gay straight away. It took a couple months before I revealed that to the kids. Actually, I dated for a while. I think we all have our period of adolescence. During that period of time, you have your gay rebirth and you're out there having a good time and enjoying and dating and, and I made a checklist. I went into a lot of this in being very intentional, right? But I wrote a checklist, like these would be like the 7 perfect things that I want in a relationship and in a partner. When I'd start dating guys, we'd be together for a couple of weeks and I just sort of say, like, do they fit the criteria? Nah, that they're 4 out of 7, not going to continue forward, and I break it off. But I met my now husband at the time, and I introduced him into the kids' life. He has kids also. He's got 4 kids, so we're like the Gady Bunch. We have 7 kids between the two of us.
Like the Brady Bunch TV show of the 1970s.
Yeah, exactly. We're like the Gady Bunch, but we've got 1 extra. It's not 6 kids, it's 7. And he was much more open with his kids, much more transparent with his kids, and came out to his kids earlier than I came out to mine. But his kids were also older. And then one by one, we started to tell my kids, and they struggled with it, but I think also they for the most part, they accepted it and were okay with it. I did have a little falling out with my oldest son for 4 years. He didn't talk to me. He was 13 at the time that I came out, so I think he was struggling with a lot of issues at the time. He was not, he just had a lot of things going on in his life at the time. And, he cut me off for 4 years at the time. So it took me a long time to rehab that relationship. We're in a much better place today. But, I'd reach out to him for 4 years. Cause I always had this mindset. I remember I had this friend at the time. She had talked a lot about, her relationship with her dad and things that her mom told her about her dad. And, it was good to have her there. But, at some point her dad just checked out because he got frustrated and stopped following up with her, and she internalized it and really hated him for it. And I remember at the time thinking, I'll never stop reaching out to my kid because my role as a father is to remind him that I love him. And, I think also for me, I knew a lot of the work that I had done, being gay and reconciling with this stuff at night when I'm laying in bed and I'm processing all these things. And, I think we all have certain truths that we acknowledge to ourselves that we may not necessarily speak to other people, right? They're truths that we hold on to. And I remember thinking to myself, the truth is, he might tell himself that I'm all these things, or all these things that he's hearing about me may sink in, but he'll never be able to say with conviction, my dad is really those things, right? And so I thought to myself, maybe he'll never talk to me, but the best gift that I can give him is a healthy internal dialogue.
Nice. That is beautiful.
Yeah, that he wouldn't have to, sit in a therapist's chair and pick all this stuff apart, at least not in terms of like not feeling loved and wanted.
So you extended kindness, caring, and compassion to leave that with him, to help him then rationalize or realize that you're important to him as well. And then he entered back into your life.
He did. Yeah, he did. Took 4 long years. I'd write him letters on the regular. If I bought things for the kids, if I went out and I got ice cream for the kids at the end of the night before I dropped them off on a dinner visit, I'd get one to go for him, and I'd say, just stick it in the freezer. He may or may not eat it, but just let him know that I sent it. He blocked me on his cell phone, so I don't think he ever got my texts or my calls, but I try periodically. I was like, maybe he'll pick them up someday. I don't know. Or maybe he'll unblock me. Birthdays and special occasions, I'd always drop off gifts and try to do for him what I did for the other kids. So, I made an effort. It was hard though. It was a really rough period,
Sounds like it was difficult, but it was the long game though.
Yeah.
The long game that you had in mind. It wasn't a short fix, but to be there, even though you weren't there, to be there for him.
Exactly. And I think in my heart, like I just sort of I became very stoic. I just sort of said like, he's never, ever, ever going to respond to me. Like we will never, ever, ever have a relationship. And I just sort of accepted that the relationship was dead. So what I'd say is like, I think the way that I got through it was, sometimes I'd write the letters and I think, how do I show engagement? But, I had to and look, I think we do this very well as formerly, married or straight presenting, gay men, you know how to compartmentalize your feelings, right? Like
that's for sure.
This is a natural thing for me. It's a very well exercised muscle. So to compartmentalize the hurt and pain that I felt was came very easily. But I still went through the motions, even if at times I just had to like not feel very much to protect myself,
Yeah. We also know how to put on that mask to protect ourselves. It may be 3 feet thick, but we know how to put on that mask to look happy and all content in life.
Absolutely. And fake it till you make it, they say, right?
That's right. So
you make it or admit it correct.
Yeah. So we put on that mask sometimes denying that we're gay.
Yeah.
And so a lot of guys I talk to are always interested in to hear somebody's married. In this case, you're married. And knowing that they may have not dated well because they didn't know why they didn't date well, but they didn't accept that they were gay. And therefore they had the mask on to protect themselves and really didn't interact. So now they're in this world, they're out, and it's like, how do I date? How do I meet a guy? So tell us about your romantic story of how you met your husband and how you navigated that whole dating experience.
Well, we have stories all the time. I mean, I happen to have married someone who is as much of a joker as I am, right? I still wake up with him every day and we laugh. I mean, that's the key thing for me. It's it's a really nice, healthy relationship. But we always kid around when people ask us. The first thing we say is we met on Christian Mingle, and you'll see people kind of look a little funny, or sometimes people are like, "Oh, that's really nice," and then we're like, "We didn't meet on Christian Mingle. They don't have a section for us. Are you kidding me?" And then we always switch to, "No, he cruised me in a bathroom," and then, but here we are, like 14 years later, we're still together. You know what I mean? Like, but the reality is it's much more tame. I looked for, healthy outlets. So there was a gay, community center in Westchester County that I had, become aware of through my therapist at the time. And so I used to go to meetings periodically. I thought, you got to put yourself out there. I tried the dating apps, but, the dating apps in 14 years ago, you have to realize the internet's been an evolution. It was a mix of, going on Match and some of those sites at the time and just being really annoyed by the whole dating scene. I mean, it was not my thing. We had Craigslist at the time, and I thought either I'm going to have a really hot date or I'm going to get murdered tonight, right? Like, it's going to be one or the other. But here we go. Let's show up, And I remember I was dating somebody at the time, and I kind of knew we were on the outs. It just was like, it wasn't the right relationship for me. We had been together for a couple of weeks, and I went through my checklist, and I was like, this isn't the right guy for me. So my ex, I remember, it was a Tuesday evening, and she didn't honor the custody schedule. I was supposed to have the kids that night. And I was livid because for me, it was really about, I was, not only did I want the time with the kids, but I felt like it was really important for them to have consistency. But it was very early on in our time apart. And I think we were figuring out those boundaries and those rules. And the guy that I was dating called me up and he said, I'm going down to this men's group tonight. What are you doing? And I unraveled and told him, about what had happened. And he said, well, why don't you come with me? Why don't you meet me down there? And I thought, I'm not going to sit at home. I'm going to go. I should do it. It's a Tuesday night. I never get to do these things. Let's take lemons and make lemonade, right? So I went and he walked past the room. They had an AA session down the hall. And I thought, oh, he's cute, but he's an alcoholic, right? Turns out that he was going to the bathroom. So he came back into the room and, and so the first checklist, I'm attracted to him. Right. But then he talked and as he talked, it was like all the check boxes went off for me. Like I was like, this is my guy. This is the one that I want. And, I remember after the meeting was over, these meetings lasted like 2 hours. I, specifically went up and grabbed him and said, give me a pen. If you have a pen, I'm going to give you my phone number. Like plug this into your phone. We have a lot in common and I don't meet a lot of people with whom I have a lot in common. And I'd love to connect with you just because we're going through a lot of similar things. And, he gave me his number. I gave him mine. And then I went out in the parking lot and I dumped the guy that I was dating with that night. And I was like, whoa. Yeah. I had a sense, I had a feeling, I had a hunch. And we went out on our first date 3 nights later, which was a Friday. And, the rest is history. We really hit it off.
So, Stefan, this time with you today has made me happy. So thank you very much.
I'm happy to be here. I really am.
I appreciate your willingness to share your story and be open. We know that this will help others when they hear that. So
that's what I hope.
Thank you again for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time, and I hope that others are able to experience as positive of a journey as I have in these last 14 years. It wasn't easy, but here I am today, and I'm happy.
I wonder how unique Stefan's story really is. That is, getting married when both the future husband and the future wife know one of them is LGBTQ+. Marriage is challenging enough. 2 people coming together in union, learning to live together, blending their lives and hopes and dreams for the future. In Stefan's situation, they came together knowing he was gay. As a child, Stefan was told that gays will be subject to a life of unhappiness. Through his journey of self-discovery and pursuit of happiness, he realized he wouldn't be happy 100% of the time, but his perspective was key to his happiness. He needed to wake up each morning wanting to be happy. This is an easy act we can do for ourselves, setting the tone of our intention as we move through the day. Rebuilding a fractured relationship is a process, as it was with his estranged son. Patience needed to be the foundation of his actions, even though there was no guarantee of achieving the desired outcome. With his acts of love, Stefan knew he was being true to himself while honoring his son. We'd be wise to follow his example in the relationships in our lives. Finally, I was struck by Stefan's clarity on what he really wanted for himself, going so far as having the list of attributes for his future partner. The list guided his behavior and actions and kept him true to himself. Too often we try to change ourselves to fit with another when we should be looking for the people in our life that fit with who we are. I wish Stefan and his Gady Bunch family continued happiness. Thanks for listening. I'm David Cotton. Join us next time for Out Late with David.
To hear more episodes, visit outlatewithdavid.com And to learn more about personal life coaching services, go to davidcottoncoaching.com.